What made Sweet Dreams by Eurythmics so successful? Was it the dark dystopian theme? The hypnotic synth riff? Annie Lennox's androgynous look with cropped orange hair? Or maybe the drum track? Well, who are we kidding? Probably not. But Sweet Dreams is a brilliant example of how a deceptively simple drum beat, if done right, can make a song hit even harder. We're going to recreate it on a modern sequencer so you can follow along and use those techniques in your own beats. And this time, we're also going to break down the synth riff. Let's get started. Hello everyone, this is... First we need a nice snappy kick. If we wanted to stay true to the original, then we would have to use the Movement MCS percussion computer. That was an obscure British drum machine, or rather drum computer, from 1981. It's even shown in the Sweet Dreams music video. Nowadays it's known as the Eurythmics drum machine. It was a bold concept for its time, featuring graphical sequence editing and a hybrid sound engine with sample playback and synthesis. But let's be real, we're never going to get our hands on one because this thing is incredibly rare. How rare is it? It's so rare that you can't even find any of its sounds as samples online. But is that really a problem? I don't think so. Some have compared its sound engines to the Simmons SDSV and the Lindrum respectively. Just not quite as good. So, as always, we'll make do with what we already have. A standard issue Lindrum kick it is. Initially I thought there was an accent on the first kick every 2 bars. But that's actually another sound layered on top. If you speed up the recording, you can hear what's going on. It sounds like a regular kick or tom with plenty of reverb, but by slowing down the sample you get this massive thundering drum. The problem is that this sound is again from the unobtainable Movement MCS, and it's kind of essential to the song. I've tried so many different samples, but none of them really fit. Let's just say I've hit my legal quota of sample diving for the foreseeable future. So we decided to rebuild the sound ourselves. As the basis, we used a kick with baked-in reverb from the Roland DR660. This has a nice acoustic character with plenty of ambience, but it's missing some punch in the mids. And that's where a synthesized kick can really help, even one that sounds super cheap on its own, like this one. And now both together. While there already is reverb on the DR660 kick, it's a bit too gated, and we want to convey an even bigger sense of space. So we put a nice reverb on it, make it a little more snappy with the transient shaper, and we bake everything together into one sample file, which we then slow down. Let's unroll this pattern to 2 bars and place our unholy creation on top of the first kick. Since we only have 1/8 notes, we might as well zoom out so you can see both bars. By the way, if you want to use this, whatever you want to call it, kick tom sample, then you can download it for free during the next 7 days on our Patreon, along with all the other samples we made for this episode. There's lots of other stuff on there as well, like 150 plus high-quality drum pattern transcriptions, cheat sheets for various drum machines and synthesizers, and of course the Drum Machine 101 book we're currently writing. Let's copy this as a starter for the second pattern. The deep drum is not playing though. Instead we get a snare. I'm assuming it was created with the analog synthesis side of the MCS movement because it sounds pretty much like out of a Simmons SDSV. So I recreated it with an emulation and I think it's pretty much spot on. No surprises here, the snare goes on the 2 and 4. But what makes this part interesting is that it uses ghost notes on the kick drum. Just place an unaccented or low velocity hit on these in-between positions. That gives you a lighter feel than just those 4 on the floor kicks. And you can easily create a few variations. Here we left out the 4th ghost note, but you can also omit the 2nd one, or both. You can hear how these variations are used later in the end jam. On to pattern 3. We'll again start with 4 on the floor kicks. We know from interviews that Dave Stewart had a Roland TR-606 drum machine early on, so I thought it might be fun to use a 606 clone just for the hi-hats. We're going to have to zoom in again though, because now we actually have to place faster 16th notes. The hi-hat pattern is very simple. It's basically closed hats everywhere, except on the offbeats where we get open hats. Same on bar 2. The pattern really just marches on without any variation. At this point, it should be clear that we are dealing with a prime example of a minimal drum beat here. It gives the other elements space to unfold. And whenever we talk about minimalist electronic pop music, you know it won't take long before we mention Kraftwerk. But in this case, there's an actual connection here. Both Kraftwerk and Eurythmics had albums produced by legendary German producer Conny Plank. And it's not hard to imagine that at least some of that philosophy rubbed off on Dave and Annie when they started producing their music themselves, as they did for the first time on this album. This part of the song also introduces some very bright and glassy percussion. And by their own account, Eurythmics actually used milk bottles for this, which might also explain the cow in the music video. But where would we even get authentic vintage 1983 North London milk bottles? Let's find out if these cheaper modern clones will also do. They are analog recreations based on the same classic design, and they share most of the features of the original. The tuning function is accessed by filling them with water. There are multi-zone trigger points, and they are even compatible with different striking materials. I would recommend an external reverb unit though. You really have to appreciate the contrast here. An unobtainium drum machine on the one hand and everyday milk bottles on the other. Functionally, this double bottle setup is kind of similar to an go-go. So that would be an alternative. But if you're into those dairy-inspired sounds, then those are also in our sample pack. The original was of course played by hand, so let's live record the sequence to capture some of that human timing. Okay, so on the first run-through of this pattern, we only get kicks and hi-hats, then the milk bottles, and on the third loop, we add snares on the 2 and 4. But the final repeat is a little extra. In bar 2, we cut off everything after the first step. And instead, we finish with a double hit on the kick and snare. Have a listen. The whole segment is a continuous build-up leading up to this double hit, and that small pause makes for a fantastic transition into the synthesizer solo. Speaking of synthesizers, let's have a quick look at how the iconic Sweet Dream synth riff can be recreated on practically any monosynth with at least 2 oscillators.
The synth riff consists of 2 parts. Part A, sawtooth plus reverb. Add a second sawtooth. Detune it by about -20 cents for a chorusing effect. Give the envelope some decay. And more attack so it feels slightly delayed. Adjust the filter to make it softer. More chorus is always good. Part B. Switch both oscillators to a square wave. Here we don't have one on oscillator 2, so we keep the sawtooth. No detuning this time. Quicker attack. And a little more decay. Part B is a bit pluckier and thinner. One ingredient of that is pulse width modulation on the first oscillator. An LFO assigned to the oscillator shape will do the trick. Lower the cutoff frequency, take away the resonance, and increase the filter envelope amount. Finally, add a phaser or flanger for some extra movement. Now we'll bring both parts together. Pan them left and right, about 50% each. That gives you a nice stereo effect. The goal here is that both sounds blend together without immediately being recognized as two separate parts. And before we start the end jam, as always, a big shout out to all of our patrons. Thanks to your support, we can keep making these videos.
Bunny.